And greetings. Happy Monday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. Steve Deace here. Hope you had a great Easter weekend. I'm alongside Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre, and we are brought to you by our friends over at First Cup Coffee Company, the Christian-owned Patriot Coffee Company. They have a flavor for every freedom-loving American. You can try them today at a discount when you go to firstcup.com and use the promo code DACE. That's firstcup.com. Promo code DACE. They'll put the roast on date right there in every bag for you so you can see it's been shipped to you within days of being roasted. So get a great cup of coffee from a company that shares the same great American values as you. At firstcup.com, use the promo code DACE. Also want to mention here off the top, just to kind of give you a moment to understand where we kind of are right now. I mean, we have momentum right now. On some level, our side has momentum right now, the likes of which I honestly don't remember. And it's like I joked a couple weeks ago, I am, for the first time in my career, flirting with optimism. All right, we are gaining ground. People are waking up. I'm getting anecdotal reports on the ground on all my social media channels as we speak about record attendance at churches of all persuasions across the Christian spectrum yesterday for Easter. So that's great. But the fight is not over. That's why Blaze TV exists. And we've built a home of some of the strongest and smartest voices on the right. And then there's us, because someone has to bat ninth in the order. You just can't have an entire team of all-stars. There's a salary cap, all right? So you've got to have your other programming. That is us, all right? You back everyone else that are creators who think for themselves, speak boldly, and refuse to be silenced by big tech or corporate media. Support investigative journalism that exposes corruption, and original documentaries that also shine a light on the deep state. We're basically everything the major corporate networks don't want to show you. All right, so use my promo code right now, and you can get a Blaze TV subscription starting at just $8 a month, the price of a fancy cup of coffee. When you use my promo code, that's blazetv.com/Dace. Use the promo code Dace, blazetv.com/Dace. Get unfiltered, unafraid, on demand, the coverage you want at blazetv.com/Dace. All right, coming up here at the bottom of the hour, we'll be joined by Bob Vanderplots, who wants to discuss something that came up on our show towards the end of last week. But man, if you've watched events that have transpired at the White House and the various accounts of the Trump White House, and in fact, even as recent as just about an hour ago, the differences between this Easter and last Easter under Joe Biden and this Easter under Donald Trump are just... I mean, it's the difference between reality and sanity. And I think maybe what went on here last year was more than an election. It was an exorcism. So we'll talk to Bob about that. It'll be your turn to ask me anything coming up in the next hour of the show. But let's kick this thing off, as we always do, with Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by That's One Way to Start the Week. Pope Francis has passed away at the age of 88 on Easter Monday. The 266th occupant of the chair of St. Peter served since a month after Pope Benedict's shocking resignation in February of 2013. Just yesterday on Easter, Vice President J.D. Vance was able to visit Pope Francis. The Catholic Church is now in a period of mourning as preparation begins for Francis's funeral. The conclave to elect a new pope is expected to begin in 15 to 20 days. Then there's this. World Economic Forum founder and chairman Klaus Schwab is stepping down. He'll serve on the board of trustees now. Schwab served as chairman since the WEF's inception back in 1971. No successor has yet been named. Klaus Schwab is 87 years old. What a Monday morning to wake up to. In other news, in an overnight ruling at the Supreme Court Friday night into Saturday, the nation's highest court ruled that the Trump administration can't use the Alien Enemies Act to deport certain illegal aliens currently being held in Texas, pending the outcome of lower court proceedings. Justices Thomas and Alito dissented from the rest of the courts, with the latter writing, quote, literally in the middle of the night, the court issued unprecedented and legally questionable relief without giving the lower courts a chance to rule, without hearing from the opposing party within 8 hours of receiving the application with dubious factual support for its order, and without providing any explanation for its order. I refuse to join the court's order because we had no good reason to think that, under the circumstances, issuing an order at midnight was necessary or appropriate. Both the executive and the judiciary have an obligation to follow the law. The executive must proceed under the terms of our order in Trump v. JGG, and the court should follow established procedures, end quote. In other immigration news, Abrego Garcia's wife was confronted on Good Morning America late last week regarding the restraining order she took out on her husband.
You did take out a temporary order of protection against your husband in 2021. Were you in fear of your husband?
Husband is alive. That's all I can say.
Senator Chris Van Hollen of the great state of El Salvador finally got his photo op with that gang member late last week and returned to the United States on Sunday.
Who did pay for this trip?
This was an officially cleared, congressional trip, cleared on a bipartisan basis. Yes.
President Trump provided an update on the tariff war, saying on Truth Social, quote, "Since our announcement of Liberation Day, many world leaders and business executives have come to me asking for relief from tariffs. It's good to see that the world knows we are serious, because we are. They must right the wrongs of decades of abuse, but it won't be easy for them. We must rebuild the wealth of our great country and create true reciprocity. But for those who want the easiest path, come to America and build in America," end quote. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth continues to face seemingly weekly hit pieces written about him from the mainstream media. A few of his staffers have been fired in recent days after an investigation into leaks. Here is Hegseth at the White House this morning.
What a big surprise that a few leakers get fired and suddenly a bunch of hit pieces come out from the same media that peddled the Russia hoax. Won't give back their Pulitzers. They got Pulitzers for a bunch of lies. Pulitzers for a bunch of lies. And on hoaxes, time and time and time again. And as they peddle those lies, no one ever calls them on it. See, this is what the media does. They take anonymous sources from disgruntled former employees, and then they try to slash and burn people and ruin their reputations. Not going to work with me.
Some good news out of the Lone Star State, where they are poised finally to enact school choice, it looks like. The passage of Texas Senate Bill 2, which came despite the opposition of nominal Republican state representatives Dade Phelan and Gary Vanderveer. And after 11 hours of debate, is a major victory for parents statewide, as well as Republican Governor Greg Abbott, who said earlier this year the legislation would be a top priority. Sunday was indeed Easter, Resurrection Day. Here's what Christianity Today was thinking about, quote, "The Bible doesn't say Jesus was nailed to a cross. One evangelical Bible scholar thinks the crucifixion may have been done with ropes."
What you've just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.
According to pollster Scott Rasmussen for Napolitan News, in a new survey, 77% of all voters believe that Jesus Christ actually existed and walked on the earth. 73% believe Jesus was the Son of God. 71% believe that he died for their sins. 65% believe he physically rose from the dead. And 62% believe he walked on water. Here is President Trump's Easter greeting.
Easter is special, and it's one of our favorite days. It's one of our favorite periods of time. We're honoring Jesus Christ, and we're going to honor Jesus Christ very powerfully throughout our lives, all throughout our lives, not just now, all throughout our lives. We're bringing religion back in America. We're bringing a lot of things back, but religion is coming back to America.
And that's what happened while we were away.
I was ecstatic to see the Christianity Today feature, because I just like clarity. And just it makes my job and one of the things we're trying to do on this show way easier when people just take the masks off and do the kind of thing that you would expect, frankly, your local left-wing rag newspaper to do on a holiday like Easter, just to troll people that it hates, that will never buy their publication because they realize they hate them. I mean, you would expect us to see this in any of the op-ed sections of any of your blue city urban newspapers around the country, which are all, run by, a bunch of 28-year-old, okay, I can't evens, who, live and die by the price of avocado toast, okay? You would expect that out of them. But for Christianity Today, which people like me have been trying to tell you is basically them, just with Bible verses, for them to just go ahead and do the same thing and just confirm it, I mean, I'm all for it. Thank you. Just makes my job a heck of a lot easier. So it's been rare. There aren't too many times over the last decade plus on this show I've had much praise for Christianity seldom, Christianity never, Christianity hardly, okay? But today I have come not to bury Christianity Today, but to praise them. Thank you. Thank you for being honest, and we know. Aaron's Montage brought to you by our friends over at Constitution Wealth. They want to know your answer to the following two questions. Are you unknowingly bankrolling the destruction of American values with every one of your investments? Do you know if your hard-earned investment dollars are being used against the agenda we all just voted for and we're fighting for right now, and instead working for the agenda that is threatening the very fabric of our great nation? Well, your investment should work as hard as you do and align with what you believe in. So let's build the parallel economy by working with an investment firm composed of professionals who are patriots like you. Have you joined the movement of Americans using their investments to hold companies accountable for their ethical behavior? Well, do it now. Take control of the future of America. Let's not get complacent. Visit constitutionwealth.com/blaze for a free consultation. That's constitutionwealth.com/blaze. And Constitution Wealth is a registered investment advisor. You should review Constitution Wealth's disclosures at constitutionwealth.com to understand their services and fees. And remember that all investing involves risk, including the risk of loss. I am a client of the firm. This is a paid endorsement, but my opinions are my own. All right, let's get to the rest of what is in Aaron's Montage. By the way, Scott DM'd me that poll over the weekend, and thank you for including it, Aaron, because it reminded me. I forgot to tell you guys, that's going to be tomorrow's Fake News or Not, are those poll results. Okay. One thing I want to address, and then we're going to get to what is literally the biggest news on the planet right now. Just to reinforce, Aaron, what you were alluding to there. I mean, if that is not... I've been out of the dating scene for a minute. Okay. I mean, I just celebrated my 28th wedding anniversary 3 weeks ago. Okay. So I'm accustomed to the current dating customs, just enough to be dangerous with 3 young adults that now are carrying on my legacy and DNA. Right. One of them who got married. Another one who would like to find someone to marry, and one that's just about to graduate high school and thinks it's possible he might have found the girl he's eventually going to marry. All right, so I hear third hand through them what it's like out there right now. All right, but I think in any era, whether it was an era of courting, whether it's the era of swipe right, whether it's the era of dating to marry or just casually dating, whether it's the summer of love, whether it's Victorian era prudity, I am pretty confident in any era. What Samuel Alito wrote to the Trump administration over the weekend would be construed by people of any era as a come on. Like, if you don't ask her out after this, there's nothing more she could do, okay? I mean, she's making it pretty obvious here that she wants you to make a move. I mean, that is Samuel Alito just saying, you're all clear, kid. Now let's blow this thing and go home. I mean, that's essentially what he's doing to the Trump White House.
Samuel bedroom eyes Alito?
Yes!
That's what I thought. That's what it sounded like. That's why I sent
Fire
it
up the Kim Carnes. He's firing the Betty Davis eyes right now. Yes. I'm looking at you. Yeah. That's more than just, lifting a little skirt and showing the ankle. I mean, he's got the whole get up on. He's dolled up. Samuel Alito is saying, what you doing tonight? Gonna buy a girl a drink, or what's a girl got to do to get a drink around here? I mean, that's what he's doing. I mean, if that is just not a straight on, I'm open, ask. I don't know what is. I mean, you sent me this over the weekend, Aaron. We were texting back and forth about it.
Yeah,
that's pretty blatant.
Yeah, I added a question mark just to make sure I wasn't reading it wrong.
Yeah. Hey, we don't have any authority to do this. The other branch has to carry out the law and basically Alito making my argument that I make all the time. Every branch gets the right to interpret the Constitution. No one branch is the final word on what the Constitution means. You know who is the final word on what the Constitution means? The people. And if there is a conflict within the branches on what the Constitution means, we have these things called elections, right?
We do.
And you can take your various interpretations, and one side in an election can believe in one branch's interpretation and go make that case to the people as effectively as they can, and the other side that represents one of the other branches can have a different interpretation and go and make that case to the people as effectively as they can, and then we just let the will of the people decide. That's what a democratic form of government in a republic is supposed to look like. And what Alito is essentially saying to the Trump White House is, what's a girl got to do to get a drink around here? We're all clear, kid. Let's blow this thing and go home. You got this. All right, man. I mean, that your target's just right up ahead. Just, hit the button. You're good. Because here's the thing. The president doesn't need the Alien and Enemies Act to defend the borders of the country. In fact, he doesn't need any act because he has Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution that names him Commander-in-Chief. And within that, by the way, is the oath of office that every president has taken. And contained within Article 2 is the phrase, defend the United States and its Constitution against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. He already has permission from the American people. They voted for him. They gave him all the permission he needs to repel an invasion. So carry on. And that's essentially what Samuel Alito is saying. Now, I'm just telling you right now, I ever run for office, I'm just telling you all flat out, I'm never enforcing anything a court tells me to do that a court couldn't do on its own. Because if a court can't do it on its own, guess what it doesn't therefore have the power to do? That's what it doesn't have the power to do. If it can't enforce it on its own, then it doesn't have the power to do that. Seems pretty logical and seems pretty simple, right?
Well, amongst the moral and religious people, yes.
Sane. In other words, a sane people.
Yes.
Correct. All right, so I wanted to make sure we highlighted that because that is essentially, any era, the law of attraction of any era would say that is a come on. We got you. Not saying if you defy him, you're going to win up here 9-0, but or you're going to win, but it ain't going to be a 9-0 L at the very least, So I don't know. That needs to be said, and it needs to be done. So let's get to what is literally right now the biggest news on this planet. And it was you start looking at these things in threes. Like I'm like checking, I'm like refreshing. Because literally an hour after the Pope Francis news broke, the Klaus Schwab news broke. And you're watching two of the most important, whatever you think of them. I don't have a high opinion of either one of them, frankly. One I have a way lower opinion of the other, obviously. The other one I would consider a massive disappointment. That being said, they are two of the biggest thought leaders on this planet, or they were. And then eventually, Father Time is undefeated and waits for no man. So you have Klaus Schwab stepping aside, and very suddenly, and at age 87, when you hear somebody steps aside at something very suddenly, of course, you start thinking to yourself at any point in time, what if that's a health situation, right? And then the Pope was seen just yesterday at Easter and with Vice President Vance. That was kind of his last public appearance. Then we wake up this morning and at age 88, so about the same age as Klaus Schwab, he passes. This leaves huge voids in terms of global thought leadership, the making, framing, and shaping, and frankly, in both cases, distribution of worldviews on this planet. And while the level of reach of the World Economic Forum is nowhere near the Catholic Church, I would argue that the World Economic Forum is frankly influencing more of the people making decisions for most of the people of this world than the Catholic Church currently is. Which means there's an opening for that to no longer be the case. Now, for those of us who remember the 1980s, and essentially you had the triumvirate in the West of Reagan, Thatcher, and Pope John Paul II, it's probably been that long since we have seen a Rome mobilized intentionally, not just at part of its mission, and then it comes down to the individual cardinal, bishop, and official in terms of whether they will fulfill that mission or not. But intentionally and systemically, that's probably the last time we have seen Rome mobilized intentionally and systemically as a global force for good against a specific vestige of the spirit of the age. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. And then we saw what the outcome of that is. That's a weapon of mass destruction. That also means, though, the Soviet Union fell in 1991. All right, so that also says it's been a minute, and if you're Aaron's generation, you grew up in an era where you don't even have a clue what we're even talking about. That generation, by the way, you're raising kids and buying houses and having families now. So like we said, it's been a minute. So what we're about to find out, and I don't know the answer to this. We have a Catholic here with us. He's going to be closer to it than us. He's more vested in it than even we are. But although I would say right now, whether you're Catholic or not, whether you're any form of Christian or not, if you believe in any form of human liberty, freedom, and flourishing, you have a vested interest in what Rome does next. Because either Pope Francis was just a misfire, and he actually got off to a fairly decent start, but you could see as the years went on, little things like, Earth Day messages and things of this nature, the slippage was kind of gradual. Then at the end, who knows? When you have the illnesses that he had and the age that he was at, there was the memo he put out about the faggotry within the priesthood. Okay, so I who knows? Who knows? But what is clear is he at the very least flirted with wokeism. Fair?
Oh, absolutely.
At the very least flirted with it. Motivations, because he was trying to be an inflection point to inject it into the conclave, I don't know. That he felt like he had to represent a conclave of all these various interests, right? And so he's managing it like you'd manage a political party or any other coalition. I don't know the answer to that. I'm not in Rome. I'm not a Catholic. I'm not as personally invested in those dynamics. And when I hand it to Todd here in a minute, he can maybe fill in some of the blanks on that for us. But whatever the motivations were, there is without question he was at least flirting with wokeism. And once you let that level of camel's nose in under the tent, what comes next will be something definitive. As in a definitive turning away from that, or a definitive turning all the more into it. Institutions, particularly ones religious in nature, do not stay neutral. They are either ascendant or descendant at any given time. And that the definitions of which directions you're going basically depend on the worldview of the beholder. But the idea that they remain neutral for some long-term period of time or try to balance the scales of various different interests for some long period of time, that's just not how history works and human nature works. So we're about to find out whether this Pope was a harbinger of what is to come based on who will succeed him, or whether or not the same thing we're seeing across a lot of the West right now, the kinds of pushback we've already discussed, will happen here within the conclave as well. And they'll return, and someone who is definitively to the Pope's right will be his successor. And whichever one of those decisions comes forward will have massive ramifications for the future of the West. Massive. And then you look at what's going to happen with the World Economic Forum. My read of that, given what the origins of that institution are, I would not view that as any form of optimistic at all. Because it is really likely somebody like Yuval Harari, is that his name, right? Yuval Harari takes over, or somebody who is now, it's very likely that it's extremely likely that Klaus Schwab was the herald, their version of a voice crying in the wilderness. And what will come next will be the real thing, which makes what Rome decides here in the coming weeks and months even more important. Because we do have the momentum now. We are having a moment now. But I'm just going to tell you right now, and I'm going to keep reasserting this. Without the church on an institutional level, we cannot sustain this. We just celebrated an event where we all were given the ultimate grim reminder. I just watched The Passion again yesterday. First time I had seen it probably in 5 or 6 years. And my goodness, I had really forgotten how great of a movie that is. And that opening scene in the Garden of Gethsemane there. I mean, I knew it was coming, and even when it happened, I sat up in my chair when it happened again. When he stomps on the head of the serpent there in the garden. See, this thing we just commemorated is a reminder. We can't do this on our own. We can't. We don't have the power within us on our own. We can't do it. And so it's going to require, the church is the only transcendent institution that God ever gave to humanity. So we are talking about an institution that represents up to 1 billion souls, depending on how sincere each of those individual person's belief really is or isn't. But that's a massive army in this fight, a massive amount of influence in this fight. So we are, Todd, like right now with these 2 deaths, we are literally having that whole which way Western man conversation. It's like really playing out for real right now.
Yes, we are. People are going to use an American political lens to view a lot of this, and I really caution you for various reasons I'll get to, but really briefly, if I will use an American analogy, I think Pope Francis was kind of the church's Obama. People on the right and the left back in 2008 were pretty tired of things as they were. I think Obama is an early herald of Trump in many ways on the right. Tired of that because Obama had to beat Hillary, the status quo. Mm-hmm. And shortly after rejecting that which was rejected during the Obama years, the right turns to Donald Trump. People were like, something new, something hip. Just the way we're doing things, we're just kind of fed up. Let's try something new. With Pope Francis, you had 450-ish years of memory serves of nothing but Italian popes. And then 2 changes from that, the Polish Pope and the German Pope, John Paul II and Benedict. But we're both very, very conservative. They're within Western Europe. We're knowns. Okay, we're finally going to go. We're going to go off into the Americas here. We're going to try the Jesuit. We're going to try some social justice stuff. And that's where it comes to what you just said and setting the table of. Did we learn anything from this? Mm-hmm. As we're right now, as Americans, did we learn anything from everything we went through? So moving forward on this, I hope whoever becomes Pope, and however they were perhaps in a very homogeneous community, it's governing the entire Catholic Christian world is a different calling altogether. But nothing short of the next crusade is what is called for. Asking Christians of all stripes to raise their game, to bear far better fruit than we've been content to in the past. We've been way too comfortable, and that is my prayer for this Pope. As I prayed for Pope Francis, I hope that he would die well. It seems like he did at the end. I hope this Pope calls the entire world to crusade, which demands getting outside of your knowns, your comfort zones, and going out into all the world, Matthew 28, and conquering it for Christ.
Amen. And, these things kind of happening on the same day, kind of the image or maybe an icon, maybe that's in this context, that's a bad word, but kind of the model of the kind of waywardness of Western civilization. Maybe I'm being a little bit too harsh on Pope Francis, but the waywardness of Western civilization, losing your moorings, your underpinnings when it comes to Pope Francis, and the image, the icon of globalization with the World Economic Forum. These 2 events converging on the same day, which we don't know what's going on with Klaus Schwab. I read somewhere he hinted earlier this month he was stepping down. Nobody knew it was going to be this soon. Mm-hmm. But what that means, along with what we've seen in recent history here in the West, specifically in the United States, with President Trump overcoming all the odds to reach this office again, I don't know. It just seems like something is happening. Something is moving. Mm-hmm. I don't know which way, and a lot of this is going to be dependent upon whether or not a lot of other people see this the same way and step up to the plate, but it just seems like something is moving.
The board is set. The pieces are in motion. It's just a matter of who's the one pushing the pieces right now, right? More in a moment. Back here on the Steve Deace Show, and we are powered by our friends over at Relief Factor. If you're struggling with chronic pain that's from too much inflammation in the body, Relief Factor, no promises here, but it could very well be the solution you're looking for. In fact, we're going to give you about 70% odds that it is, because over the years, 1 million people have tried the 3-week quick start from Relief Factor, and 70% of them saw such great results in 3 weeks or less that they stuck with the product long term. So what do you got to lose for $20 to see if you don't see a difference in your pain in 3 weeks or less with the drug-free supplement created by physicians who can prescribe drugs, known as Relief Factor? Try the 3-week quick start today. Go to relieffactor.com to give that a shot. That's relieffactor.com. It's less than $1 a day. Or call them at 800-4-RELIEF, 800-4-RELIEF. And we welcome in our good friend Bob Vanderplots. Good to see you, brother. Happy Easter belatedly.
Yeah, happy Easter to you as well. Darla and I had the opportunity to go to Columbus, Ohio, spend it with family.
I cannot think of a worse place on planet Earth to celebrate Easter than Columbus, Ohio. Hear that.
Yes. Oh, we had a great time. And also saw...
Although, on the other hand, you know what? One thing that probably happened more this weekend than happens the whole rest of the year combined in Columbus, Ohio, people showered. So maybe you picked the best time of the year to go, as a matter of fact.
Columbus was great. And by the way, we also saw our good mutual friend, Vivek Ramaswamy.
Governor in waiting there.
As he's putting together his governor's campaign. It looks like the primary is all but a done deal. Mm-hmm. And then we'll see who the Democrats run over there. But I think it's a great opportunity for him to showcase executive leadership skills.
I agree. And this is why I was an early proponent of his candidacy for this. Mm-hmm. Because we have a couple of existential fault lines on the right that we have to settle. That right now, with pretty much everybody united behind desiring the success of the Trump administration for obvious reasons, have kind of been put to the back burner, but are still simmering there. And one of them is, do you win to lead or lead to win? Mm-hmm. Okay, so is it really just about messaging and memeing? And I've admitted I've come around a little bit on this in the last couple of years, that some of the digital memeing and messaging is more impactful than maybe I was giving it credit for a few years ago. All right, but there is still no substitute for leadership. That's why our theme this year is lead. Yeah. And the one thing about Vivek is he had not done anything in the public arena really at all to demonstrate. I mean, he hadn't really been active in any of our causes, any of our campaigns. In fact, he wrote a book that was completely contrary to, in many respects, he was very critical of January 6th and the president on that. And now he's essentially running as, I'm doing, free Trump videos with Laura Loomer, right? Mm-hmm. And so that captured the imagination of kind of the online primarily people, but then a lot of the on-the-ground actual activists that have been around for a long time were like very skeptical, like, hey, where's this guy been all of a sudden, right? Well, I can just tell you, and I was on the DeSantis debate team at the Miami debate, and that's the one where, and I sat right next to Vivek's wife, and that is the one where Vivek just destroyed Nikki Haley in that debate. I mean, I thought she was frankly going to cry. You know what I'm talking about?
I think he also destroyed the Republican Party in that debate, if I recall right.
Yes, but so he is a powerful messenger, no question about it. So I would like to see what happens if you try to message or marry that level of messaging to actually governing. Yeah. And the world is not as cut and dried once you're in office as it is when you're memeing online. And that's why, and I don't know what the answer is either. You kind of need to do what he does to win, right? Yep. But then once you win, you have to be able to show you can implement a policy and can lead at the same time, right?
We have a partner in this ministry that he also listens to your show all the time. So he's one of those three. But he partners with our ministry, and he always says, Bob, I'm a results-oriented guy. Mm-hmm. You show me results, I keep investing. Mm-hmm. You don't have results, I stop investing. Mm-hmm. So regardless of what the message is, regardless of what the meme, I'm a results-oriented guy. This gives Vivek and others like him an opportunity to show I can be a results-oriented governor.
Agree. That's why I wanted him to do this job rather than just take a Senate appointment. Sure. Because that's another place where you can kind of hide. Just be a backbencher, say things that could never be true, but will fire people up. I want to see a guy who, because one thing he does have is a lot of executive experience. Yep. He doesn't have like any experience on our issues at all in the real world, but he has led very successful corporations. So I would love to see him now try to take those talking points He's kind of the antithesis of DeSantis, right? Where DeSantis had all these results, but he really wanted him to message like Vivek did, right? All right, so now in a way, you're kind of doing this inside out with Vivek. He gets the messaging that inspires people, and that's what's cleared.
Now you need the results.
Yep, he's cleared the primary field. He's got the president's support and everything else. But now if he gets in there, can he actually govern with those talking points?
Yep. And after being at his house, too, and did a podcast with him, what I will say this about Vivek is he'll be a lot better off being in Columbus as governor of Ohio with that young of a family versus going back and forth to D.C. trying to be a U.S. senator and one of 100. Anyhow, what are we talking about today?
All right, let's get to I want to start with something that we talked about towards the end of last week, and Aaron made a comment in passing, and it just like a light bulb went on, and it was something I thought a lot about over the weekend. And last year at this time, or at Easter was earlier last year, but last year at Easter time, we had a White House that celebrated Trans Day of Visibility.
I remember that.
All right. I mean, we had, we had nudists on the White House lawn and with, their fake mammary glands that they had gotten surgically, added on and everything else. I mean, it literally looked like some kind of B-roll from Sodom and Gomorrah, basically. Right. And the contrast of that with the gospel messaging that Trump has given out on a couple of different occasions, what he put out in advance of early last week to start off Holy Week, what he put out even today, all right, where he specifically invoked the name of Jesus Christ several times, not just God in generically Judeo-Christian terms, okay? I mean, the contrast here, almost makes you think that wasn't an election last year as much as an exorcism. So I thought, let's start there with your thoughts on that.
Well, I think so. We talked about in the team meeting just before I came in the show. Leadership matters. Elections matter. If you don't believe that, there's your contrast right there. Whether you're all in Trump, not all in Trump, whatever it is. But with Biden and what they did to that White House under Obama, Biden, and then under Biden, Harris, lighting up the White House with the rainbow flag to celebrate the LGBTQ plus. Last Easter, remember that very well, that this was the Trans Visibility Day. And all of a sudden, you're just packing that yard, not full of solemn things, one nation under God, let's look higher, think bigger, and thank God because we all need a savior. No, it's we need trans visibility. And then you look at Trump. From the post about talking about the life and the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And all of us need a savior, and that's where our true hope is. I mean, that's wow. That's a wow stuff. Matter of fact, I texted him after that, just thanking him for that type of leadership. But then seeing B-roll, Steve, I don't know if you saw this, I'm sure you did, but when they're getting ready for him to host, I think it was on Thursday night or Wednesday night or Thursday night of Holy Week, but they had the Liberty University practicing, Christian Easter hymns.
Oh, and the staff and the Liberty Choir just had like an impromptu performance of Amazing Grace just right there in the White House.
How cool is that? And then seeing the pastors fill there and him giving a tour of these pastors through the White House. It's completely different today. And so again, is Trump always the guy that resembles the fruits of the Spirit? Probably not. Is he one to remind us of our foundation, where our true hope is? He sure did it this Easter. Praise God.
When you stop and think about it, if we all agree here, whether we agree that it should be or not is a different debate. But we probably would all agree here that the most influential platform in the world is the presidency of the United States.
Oh, without question.
Now, we can probably have disagreements about whether in an ideal situation any political office should have that honor, but I don't think we could debate that right now that it does, right?
And I would argue that, Steve, though, even from Boying of that, it's still God's office. Government is his institution. Sure. It's not a secular institution. He refers to them as ministers of God.
I meant that in the context of like somebody like Todd, for example, who is Catholic, would obviously desire that would not be the case, and Rome would be, right?
Sure.
Okay, but right now, given the state of things, the White House is clearly the most influential platform in the world, and the guy inhabiting it has invoked the name of Jesus Christ without it being a swear word as many times as I can remember, and I'm 51, I can remember in many a moon from that in terms of reverential tones as many times as I can remember, just like in the last even couple of weeks.
And, God has used kings before. When you think of Nathan and David, when you think of Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar, when you think of, God has used others, but a lot of times it's shepherds coming alongside as well. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times we think about Billy Graham being that shepherd. And, for the Catholic Church, the Pope being that shepherd. But then you take a look at, back then it was Joseph to Pharaoh as well. And look, God accomplishes a lot when those two intersect. And it's the heart of the Daniel Impact model.
The contrast here between where we were a year ago at this time with that presentation and where we are now, agree or disagree that simple, even deeply existential political divisions alone do not create that level of worldview clash, that we are literally watching spiritual warfare being waged out from the unseen realm into what we see and what we are able to see in our daily headlines, the things we read, the stuff we hear and watch, etc. That there's more happening than just a mere clash of political ideologies here.
And I say it all the time to our base. I truly believe God has a purpose for Donald Trump's leadership. And I believe he's favored him with a win for such a time as this, and using an unlikely vessel to carry out his messaging. It's just like God, quite frankly, to say, this is how I'm going to work. This is how I'm going to operate. So when you go back to the 2020 election, stolen, not stolen, the fact is, if he got in, it was by the hair of his chinny chin chin, and he had a Democrat Congress. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to have you sit out for 4 years, and you're going to have January 6th, you're going to have all the indictments, you're going to have all the other stuff. America's never going to elect this guy president. All of a sudden, you have a modern-day landslide, and now you actually have a Congress that you can work stuff through and with. I believe God has had a hand and a purpose on Donald Trump's leadership, and I'm just thankful that this Easter he's chosen to embrace that and to share that message with the entire world.
Then the biggest story on the planet right now, we were just discussing it before you came on, is the death of Pope Francis and what comes next. We kind of laid out whether you are Catholic or not, or even Christian or not. If you have any reverence for freedom, liberty, flourishing in the West in particular, you have a vested interest in what happens here. This Pope became increasingly woke as his era went on. And so was that just his own individual slippage? He did come from a part of the world in the Southern Hemisphere that is, as Todd and I have discussed on the show many times, Christianity of all stripes, when you get south of the equator, is pretty fused with the kind of social justice philosophy, fused with Christianity, and he kind of came out of that ecosystem. So does he represent a moment of slippage, or is he a harbinger of what is to come? And I think who they choose next there in Rome will determine it. Will determine that. And if they move back further to moral certainty, you could have the kind that office can have the impact that John Paul II had in toppling the Soviet Empire. If not, then I don't even want to contemplate that, frankly.
Well, again, I think it goes right back to what we talked about with President Trump and Joe Biden. Leadership matters. And it's going to matter a lot to the Catholic Church and to the Western world and to all of us, quite frankly, that they choose and that they choose well. That being said, my heart goes out. My prayers, my sympathy goes out to those in our brothers and sisters in the Catholic community for losing a pope. It goes back to a conversation my son and I had on our drive back from Columbus. Darla and I had it's a 9-hour drive. And so we had a lot of times to visit, and we didn't know about the Pope's death yet. But we were talking about religion. I said, whether it's the Lutheran Church, the Methodist Church, the E-Free Church, whatever, the Assemblies of God Church, the Catholic Church, the church does not save you. Only Jesus saves you. And the Pope knows that too. I mean, full well the Pope knows that now. It's only Jesus that saves. He's the one who is on the cross. He's the one who bore our sin, our shame, and our guilt. He's the one who went to the depths for 3 days of death and conquered death and rises again. That's where our hope lies, in Jesus. And frankly, if the Catholic Church chooses a pope, that embraces that and the message of that alone. Just keep it simple. Stay to God's word. Be true. You can speak truth and do it in love. I totally get that. But not to speak truth is not to be loving at all. So to speak truth, but to do it in love.
Gentlemen, you have any thoughts on what Bob and I just discussed here in the final 2 minutes?
Yeah, what you said about, there's going to be plenty of chance to comment in the coming weeks about Pope Francis, but what you said about how God is using Donald Trump, I think it's important when we talk about that. I think we all agree that all of us, whether our station is in government or not, all of us are called to the same thing. And I think he is being uniquely chosen because of how broken and odd he is in so many different ways. God is trying to tell us, I've called all of you. Too many of you have said no to me. So yes, I'm choosing this oddball. Yeah. It is an opportunity for all of us to look hard in the mirror. This is a God story. It's not really a Donald Trump story. And that goes all the deeper because Donald Trump is the one who is chosen. Yeah.
And even going back to the Pope, you talk about if being a theological leader like a Billy Graham or a Pope Francis or a Pope John Paul II, if I could schedule my death, I'd schedule it the day after Easter to point everybody back to Easter. And to me, that's even a God story right there, saying, you know what, I'm going to point people back to the real reason here.
From Lord of the Rings, the final movie, was it the beacons are lit? I mean, this happening on Easter, God is moving. The beacons are lit. We all have a choice to make, whether looking at why is this working out for Donald Trump? Why is he changed? We have to ask the same of ourselves. This may be a now or never moment.
Well said.
Yeah, what you just articulated, Bob, is something that I was just listening this morning on the way in. That was something that that Pope Benedict actually emphasized, and I've tried to find the exact quote because I listened on the radio and I couldn't find it, but something along the lines of sound doctrine is love. When your doctrine is correct and good and true and beautiful, that is love. Mm-hmm. What is the absence of love is twisting your doctrine to fit itching ears. So that is, speaking truth and love as if those things are opposed always points us down the wrong path.
Yes.
Aaron, when you think about that, everybody refers to 1 Corinthians 13 as the love chapter.
30 seconds.
But what it says is that, true love hates evil and rejoices in the truth.
Amen.
That's the love chapter right there. And I think it's as simple as that. You hate evil and you rejoice in truth.
Amen. Good to see you, Bob. Thank you.
Good to see you guys. God bless.
All right. And when we come back, it'll be your turn to ask me anything. Stay tuned. We're back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast with Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre. I'm Steve Deace. Let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox, which you can access by either emailing the show, steve@stevedeace.com. That's DEACE. Like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Also, make sure, please, that you subscribe to our new YouTube channel at Deace Show on YouTube. That's at Deace Show on YouTube, as we are trying to start from scratch there, literally all over again, given all the censorship we encountered for all the truth we told you the last few years that the folks at Google who owns YouTube didn't want us to tell you. They thought you'd be better off dead, basically. Also, make sure if you listen to the podcast version, like, rate, subscribe, or follow if you're on Apple iTunes. Thank you if you've done that. That makes sure if you hit that subscribe or follow button that every time we do a new episode, it's there in your feed every single time. Please also leave us a 5-star review. We have just, last week we had every episode that we did last week, all 5. Ended up being at one point in time or another in the top 20 of the religion category on Apple last week. One of the biggest podcast categories that Apple has. So thank you guys very much for that. We appreciate that. It's not just the amount of people and downloads we get that helps with that, but the interactions and engagements too. All right. So hitting subscribe or follow, the 5-star reviews, those all help our ranking as well. We could not do this without you guys. So thank you very, very much. We appreciate each and every single one of those. Also would appreciate it. My next book, which we've kept it on the down low, we're little by little over the next few weeks now going to let you have a sneak peek of it. Richie Meets the Rainbow. If you want to get more information and more exclusive first peeks here in the next few days, you can go to Richie Meets the Rainbow, RICHIE, RichieMeetsTheRainbow.com. Go there and see and sign up to make sure you get those kinds of updates for this project when it comes out in June, the most demonic time of the year. You have never celebrated Pride Month like this before, but you needed to. In fact, all of America needed to. We just talked about with the fact we didn't have an election last year as much as an exorcism, a cleanse. This book is that kind of a cleanse, all right? So just imagine if Dr. Seuss and John MacArthur combined to write something that would destroy Pride Month, this is the book they'd write. All right, so RichieMeetsTheRainbow.com to get more information there. RICHIE for RichieMeetsTheRainbow.com. This part of the show brought to you by our friends over at Field of Greens. I know we have crazy schedules, so eating 5 servings of fruits and vegetables seems impossible, yet that's what's recommended nevertheless. So that's where Field of Greens comes in. All right, a delicious glass of Field of Greens daily. It's like nutritional armor for your body. Each fruit and vegetable is doctor selected for a very specific health benefit. There's our heart health group, lungs and kidney groups, metabolic ones for healthy weight and more. You'll love the energy that you can get with Field of Greens, and you'll love the confidence that even if you had a cheat day like Easter yesterday, for example, you can enjoy it somewhat guilt-free anyway, because you're still getting those fruits and vegetables, those servings you need every single day from Field of Greens, the nutrition that your body needs daily. And you're going to notice the difference in improved health as well, or your money back. So let's get you started with my special discount right now. We're going to get you 20% off your first order. That's 20% off your first order if you use the code Steve at fieldofgreens.com. Fieldofgreens.com. Use the code Steve at checkout to get 20% off with code Steve at fieldofgreens.com. And with that, it is your turn to ask me anything. Our followers on Facebook get to propose the questions this week. You guys, of course, know the drill. All right, I've not seen any of these questions at all. Todd has seen them all, selected the ones that we will answer on the air. Aaron is now about to unveil those, and I will see them for the first time along with all of you.
We'll begin with Sean Meyer. I heard in Easter Sunday's sermon that we shouldn't search for evidence of biblical events, but just rely on faith alone. I disagree with that, and I think that researching artifacts such as the Shroud of Turin or the science of flood geology only strengthens our faith. Your thoughts?
I completely agree. Now, we could get into a theological argument here. Really, it's more of a soteriological argument here, which is a science of the study of salvation. How are we saved? Okay. And so you might have heard something at church that was trying to basically make a case for sometimes what's referred to as presuppositional apologetics. All right. And so presuppositional apologetics basically is not always, but typically associated with people who have a more reformed or Calvinistic is sometimes how it's referred to, soteriology. So they place a heavy emphasis on the sovereignty of God and election. And so therefore, presuppositional apologetics, since election ultimately determines how we are saved and not evidence, another E word, okay, that in that case, the consistent stating and reliance on the sovereignty of God kind of acts as that call to the elect in a way. That it would kind of like help to, I don't want to make it, I'm going to say something that won't be accurate necessarily, but it's the best description I can come up with. Kind of a trigger in a way, you know, like a dog whistle. Like dogs can hear at a frequency that we cannot, okay? And so presuppositional apologetics kind of thinks, they won't necessarily say this, but in the end, that's kind of what they think. What they kind of think is that emphasizing reliance on the scriptures and justification by faith alone and the sovereignty of God acts basically to call the elect to salvation because his sheep would then hear his voice. Similar to how there are certain frequencies that, you know, certain species of being can hear and understand, and there are frequencies that others can't, okay? So you might have heard something in church along those lines per se, and that's what they meant. Oh, no, that's not true of is it Sean who wrote that?
Yep.
Okay. then there's other people that in this audience who come from traditions and denominations who do put a heavy reliance on presuppositional apologetics. So, but I mean, the Lord had people put up living stones. In the Old Testament, the rabbis added tassels of remembrance. Okay, I mean, God put himself in human form. I mean, ultimately, let's make sure we don't even turn evidence into an idol. I mean, the reality is that most people refuse to believe in Jesus not because of a lack of evidence, but because of a lack of humility. I don't want to stop. I like being a sinner. I want to be one. I don't want to give it up. Right? So, I mean, you can, Moses showed Pharaoh 10 plagues. And Pharaoh it wasn't that at plague 8, Pharaoh was like, this preponderance of evidence here that you have presented me has me completely reassessing things. No, he fought it every step of the way. His heart was hardened, first by himself and then by the Lord. Right? So, it's the whole Rick Warren thing. He started Saddleback Church on a pole where he polled the people there in Saddleback, California, why don't you go to church? Well, I mean, I could have saved him all kinds of money. It's the same answer, whether it's Saddleback, California, or your mama, Ohio, or your grandpa, Scotland, okay? I'm a sinner, and I don't want to be told that I am. That's the answer. In any Gaelic, English, Hiawathan, choose the language. That's the answer. I'm a sinner, and I don't want to hear otherwise. That's the real answer. So you can turn evidence and those kinds of things into an idol too, but ultimately the Lord came in the flesh. He left a physical legacy of himself, or evidence. The Lord had Old Testament Israel leave physical evidence of the works that had been done to sustain posterity of future generations, or evidence. Anybody want to add anything to that before we move on to question 2?
Didn't Jesus tell doubting Thomas, did you believe because you've seen? Blessed are those who have believed without seeing. He didn't say, cursed are you for believing after seeing.
Yep.
But I think your last point there is fundamental to this. Did Jesus come in the flesh or did he not? Is he alive or is he not?
Just spiritually alive?
Correct.
Or physically alive?
Correct.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
Well, Romans 1 is obviously a cautionary tale that we started off our now year-long journey in Romans. It also tells you that you can know me by evidence that I've given you. The things I have made, you can come to know me on some level. So I think there's whether that the shroud itself is obviously a extraordinary creation of the Lord, if it is the Lord's, for the sake of argument. But isn't it just a mountain or a stream or the hairs on your head or the birds in the field? Isn't that what we're talking about really at the end of the day?
Even if you are a big believer in presuppositional apologetics, and I have, again, we're getting into things that are, and when we get to some of these chapters soon in Romans, these are some of the things sympathetically that I think the scriptures lean towards some of these views. So that's why I'm familiar with them. They're some of my own views, or at least I lean to some of these views, okay? But nevertheless, let me give you another reason why you present evidence to unbelievers, whether they are elect or not. It defends the character and integrity of God, and he merits you advocating on his behalf, given the advocacy he's already given to you. So let me give you a practical example of what I mean. Over the weekend, some of you guys maybe have seen the clips. Charlie Kirk sitting down with Bill Maher. Have you guys seen some of these clips?
Yeah.
All right, and Bill Maher is just sitting there, just getting drunk and getting stoned the entire time, right? In some respects. And you guys have probably also seen clips of Charlie Kirk going 1 on 50 on college campuses. It's just him with a microphone and security. All right, just taking on entire populations of college campuses and all their questions and everything else. So it's not like Charlie doesn't know, at least on some level, his stuff. It's not like he's bashful or cowardly, right? He's unused to confrontation, right? Okay. But you can just see here that there was literally nothing that really Charlie could say that was going to get Bill Maher to say, maybe I should not take this 47th drag off this marijuana, off of this joint, right? He's committed. and the Holy Spirit will have to crack the code there. He's committed. The heart is hardened. He's committed to his, depravity, and he wants it. He's internalized it. It's his identity. But here's the thing. What about everybody else that's watching Bill Maher? See, it's not just a one-to-one exchange there, right? Mm-hmm. Bill Maher is giving Charlie a platform to invade Maher's audience. Mm-hmm. Furthermore, Bill Maher, if and when he sadly goes to hell, he's not going to have, no one will be able to say, God did not warn me. God did not tell me. See what I'm trying? So even if you believe in presuppositional apologetics, defend the honor and integrity of your Lord so that no one is without excuse. Everyone was presented the case. All right. So you played yourself. Do not blame this on God. He gave you what you said that you wanted. And instead, praise him in the middle of your eternal torment. Thank him. He gave you what you said you wanted. He allowed you to have what you told him you wanted. You said you wanted evil, you wanted rebellion. He gave it to you. You have no claim on God. You have no excuse. You cannot say you did not know. So I don't think this is a great answer for non-believers, but let me tell you what the best answer for believers is. Because Dad said so. That's pretty much the best answer. Now, I think it's a great answer for non-believers too. They just won't typically respond to that one. Okay. But if we're in the family, I kind of think because Dad said so is kind of pretty much the best answer we get. Anybody got a better answer than the guy who let you come into the family, brought you into the family, and can take you out, by the way, said so, okay? And without him, there is no family, and therefore, by the grace of God, go you to hell as well. So how about come up with a better answer than Daddy said so. Abba Father said to do it. All right, we're good here. I got nothing else. We're good.
Let's go to this. Gina Torrio says, is it a violation of the dude code to marinate a steak rather than just use seasoning? Is steak sauce also off limits?
I don't think either one of those things are violations.
Where is this coming from?
I have no idea. Now, to me, the ideal is the ability to cook a steak or have a steak served to you where you don't even feel like that adds to the enhancement. But it's not everybody can do that. Not every restaurant can do that. Some steak sauces are great. Some marinades like Caribbean jerk, I'm a huge fan of that. Okay. So if you're doing like steak fajitas or something, you want to have a Caribbean jerk kind of a marinade or something of that nature. No, just don't do the whole poking holes in it for the marinade to go thing when you do that with beef. If you didn't know that, don't do that with beef. Because you actually end up draining the juice out of the beef when you do that. You do that with chicken and pork, but not with beef.
What?
The whole poking the holes thing, you don't do that with beef.
Oh, gotcha. I thought you said don't marinate. But
No. I mean, when you go to marinate it, when you marinate chicken and pork, you poke the holes in it so the marinade will come through, right? Okay. You don't want to do that with beef.
I misheard you.
Because you'll end up draining it of the fat and the juice.
It's rare when you've got a food take that I endorse in full.
It is rare.
Well done.
It is the season of miracles, after all. Yeah, we just had.
He is risen.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah,
there's some unity of the brethren right there.
Yeah.
It's possible. Yes.
There's nothing quite as good as like a T-bone steak, which is kind of marginal in terms of if you just cook it on its own.
Yep.
Just Italian dressing.
Oh yeah.
Marinate that for a day.
Oh yeah.
And then grill it. That's great.
That is great. I agree. Now, like a ribeye, I would not marinate a ribeye. I'm going to look for marbling and seasoning because the amount of fat that's already contained in that particular piece of steak, if you cook it right, or you go to a place that knows how to cook it right, that marbling and seasoning is going to do more for you than whatever you'd put in it to mix it up. But not every steak is like that. So yeah.
Next, let's go to Michael Bell. Several verses, such as Ephesians 5, 3, and 4, refer to refraining from obscenity and coarse joking. Given how much language has changed over 2,000 years, what can we be sure of that this means? Is the male tradition of the fart joke and the like out of the question? What exactly counts as obscenity? Do we know where to draw the line, or is it just best to keep quiet if unsure? This is hard for me because I have ASD and I already have a hard enough time knowing if things are inappropriate. Thank you.
This is a great question, actually. And I mean, I wrestle with this question all the time, okay? Because the scriptures make it, in fact, let me just use Paul. Paul says very explicitly, crude humor, coarse language should not be found among you, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, this is the same Paul that tells the Judaizers who are demanding that new Gentile believers in Christ all go get circumcised, or they can't really be Christians now. That if they really love circumcision so much and they keep imposing this as an obstacle on people coming to faith in Yeshua Messiah, who fulfilled the law. He said it is finished. That's what he did. He fulfilled the wrath of God. The law is fulfilled. All right, he fulfilled it. All right, so now you're preventing Gentiles from coming to Messiah because you're imposing a system on them that they have that Messiah has already fulfilled. He has taken that obligation away. And so therefore you've become a stumbling block to the family of God growing. And so he gets upset. And he says to these very same people, if you love circumcision so much, then cut your entire penis off and really demonstrate, prove to us the level of belief you have and what removing this sensitive piece of your skin really does in terms of bringing you closer to God than you could ever come through Christ alone. That's what he says. Then prove your own point. Cut the whole thing off. I mean, I would imagine if a couple guys got into an argument at this, in the atrium at church in front of a crowd, and one of them just said, "Hey man, just go cut your whole junk off," that would be really inappropriate given the setting, right? Mm-hmm. So how? I don't know. I think context matters here. Well, great. Go ahead.
I think you've answered. I'm just trying to help because you've answered your own question. I don't think there's a hierarchy of truth here. And I think you've answered the question when you've talked about Rahab and lying. She's serving God ultimately.
Yes.
If you're
so context
now, are most
matters.
People using obscenity at the time they're
Correct.
doing it serving God?
Yes.
Probably not.
Yeah.
But if you are serving God and there is a context, and there clearly is biblical context in the one you just mentioned and in Rahab the harlot of all people, ultimately serving God at a very important part in history, there you have it.
What is the, I mean, there are numerous examples of this. Ezekiel 23. All right. Just going to warn you if you have any kids by. 3, 2, 1. You've been warned. This is Ezekiel writing as an oracle of God. The word of the Lord came to me, son of man, there were 2 women, the daughters of one mother. They played the whore in Egypt, and they played the whore in their youth. Their breasts were pressed and their virgin bosoms handled. Ohala was the name of the elder, and I think it's Oliba is the name of her sister. They became mine, and they bore sons and daughters. As for their names, Ohala is Samaria, and Oliba is Jerusalem. Oholiba, I should say, is Jerusalem. Ohala played the whore while she was mine, and she lusted after her lovers, the Assyrians, clothed in purple, governors and commanders, all of them desirable young men, horsemen riding on horses. She bestowed her whoring upon him, the choicest men of Assyria, all of them, and she defiled herself with the idols of everyone after whom she lusted. She did not give up her whoring that she had begun in Egypt, for in her youth men had lain with her and had handled her virgin bosom and poured out their whoring lust upon her. Therefore I delivered her into the hands of her lovers, into the hands of the Assyrians, after whom she lusted. These uncovered her nakedness. They seized her sons and daughters, and as for her, they killed her with the sword, and she became a byword among women when judgment had been executed on her. Her sister, Oholiba, saw this, and she became even more corrupt in her lust and in her whoring, which was worse than that of her sister. She lusted after the Assyrians, governors and commanders, warriors clothed in full armor, horsemen riding on horses, all of them desirable young men. And I saw that she was defiled. They both took the same way, but she carried her whoring further. She saw men portrayed on the wall, the images of the Chaldeans portrayed in vermilion, wearing belts in their waist with flowing turbans on their heads, all of them having the appearance of officers, a likeness of Babylonians whose native land was Chaldea. And when she saw them, she lusted after them and sent messengers to them. And the Babylonians came to her into the bed of love, and they defiled her with her whoring lust. And after she was defiled from them, she turned from them in disgust. She carried on her whoring so openly and flaunted her nakedness, I turned from disgust from her. Yet she increased her whoring, remembering the days after her youth, when she played the whore in the land of Egypt, and lusted after her lovers, and there whose members, that means penises, whose members were like those of donkeys, and whose issue, that means ejaculate, was like that of horses. Thus you long for the lewdness of your youth, when the Egyptians handled your bosom and pressed your young breasts. I could go on, but essentially this whole chapter is like this. Now, I would ask, when was the last time you went to a church and that was your scripture reading of the day. If we made a film depicting these events, what would it be rated?
Well,
and what should it be rated?
And we have
frankly?
an R-rated faith.
It would be, and it should be rated R. It would be, and it should be. So, what is the now? Here's the other thing: is this kind of language the exception or the norm throughout the scriptures?
The exception.
It's an exception, not the norm, because mercy triumphs over judgment. But it is. But exception means that it is also present at the exact same time, right? Okay.
And necessary, depending on context.
Depending on the context. Yeah. So I think now here's the thing we also have to guard as believers. We have to guard our testimonies, right? Okay. And so like in our culture, the F-bomb is considered a term of very low grade crudity and obscenity, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, we even in our current moral culture, if you drop more than one F-bomb in a film, you get an automatic R rating, for example. Okay, all right. So, because there is nothing biblically that says F-bombs are great, there's nothing in context to counter that. See what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So therefore, the context for the believer that would take precedence in such a case would be to guard our testimonies, right? Yes. All right. Now, this would be considered. Unbelievers do not want to hear a sermon like this. What I just read from because even though they like this kind of language, but the context in which it is given would judge them against their own idolatry. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. The things that they lust after instead of God, the things that they whore after instead of God, right? All right, so we don't make what makes the culture at large offended the standard. We don't do that as a primary mission. But that doesn't mean we don't ever do that. The primary mission is to love the Lord your God with your heart, soul, strength, and mind. Then the second is just like it, but the second, to love your neighbor as you love yourself. So is there a biblical context presented for making F-bombs just a casual part of conversation in public? Is that anywhere to be found, anywhere Genesis to Revelation? No. So therefore, there is no demand of God where an F-bomb is concerned, right? Okay? Because if there was, you'd put that first ahead of what the culture was offended by, right? Yeah. But so since there is no edict of oracle of God to say, here's the amount of F-bombs and in the proper public context to be using them, then the second law would come into play. All right, which is to love my neighbors, I love myself. Yeah. And in our culture, even in the lewdness of our culture, that term in public is considered a low-grade form, even now, of crudity. Therefore, what does it do for a believer in public to be routinely associated with such a term? See what I'm saying?
Totally.
And the term, by the way, the key word there is routinely, and the two key words are routinely and publicly. All right. All right. What I mean is someone invades your home and it's 3 a.m. and everybody's asleep and you're trying to wake everybody up and the adrenaline is going and rushing and everything else. And you're like, hey, wake the bleep up, everybody, to get everybody's attention. That's not a time. Father, I'm sorry. I must get everybody out of the house. They're threatened. You see? So there's some common sense here. That's why routinely and publicly. All right. Would the use of an F-bomb in that hyper situation be in any way, shape, or form looked and frowned upon after the fact as a detriment to your witness? No. If you routinely and publicly use the phrase as slang, as part of your vernacular, would it? Yes.
Well, I've got a perfect example we've mentioned on the show before of what you're trying to get at. Mm-hmm. In the movie Father Stu, Mark Wahlberg's character has reformed himself, changed his ways, cleaned some acts up. But when he, on the way to becoming a priest as a deacon with another deacon, goes into a prison, and the first deacon tries to give the very white bread conversation, and it's going nowhere. And those guys are hardened, and they have no time. And then Father Stu says, I can do street. Mm-hmm. I've been street. And he pulls that out, language and all, context.
Context.
And those men are like, oh, give me some gospel now.
Now, is there any context where we take the Lord's name in vain?
No.
Nope. In fact, that's a commandment. So there's no context for that. Okay? None. Is there any context where we can bear false witness against another? Mostly no, unless another higher law like life is at stake. So that would mean probably 90% plus of the time the answer to that would be No. In a rare situation, you find yourself in the shoes of a Rahab or Corrie ten Boom, that would be an exception. But most of the time, that in and of itself would hold up as there is no context for it. See what I'm saying?
Of course.
So text without context is just pretext. And we can get very subjective. I mean, when I read this out loud, did anybody get triggered sensually in what I just read from Ezekiel? Because if you did, go to the police station. You're a sociopath. If you were sensually, triggered by this, then you might have been offended. You might have said, hey, that language doesn't belong around kids in any kind of context. But if you were sensually triggered by this, if you were aroused by this, you are a sociopath, and you're the one we've been looking for. The vast majority of people, no one was sensually allured or aroused by this, right? Similarly, when we mock Lindsey Graham for being a closet homosexual, if you are sensually aroused by that, get thee to a nunnery, okay? Because it's very clear that the context of why I do that has nothing to do with trying to promulgate sodomy and homosexual behavior. It is instead to point out what a fraud and a farce, what a fraud he is on an individual level, and what a farce it is for a state that fashions itself to be the buckle of the Bible Belt to keep promulgating such an effeminate betrayer as one of its own U.S. senators and inflicting him on the rest of the American people. That's 99.99% of people, when we make Lindsey Graham jokes, which context do they take it in, do you think? The former I just mentioned, you're titillated in some way, or the latter? You understand?
Well, the one you're intending.
Yeah. And I'm going to, you know what? And when it comes to 99.999% and the credibility of my witness, that's the best I can do. I'm a human being. I can't please everybody. Somebody's offended all of the time. I get a note every week. No, let me rephrase that. Every day. I got a note. Somebody, loves the show, doesn't think we should make hell a joke at all, and Aaron did last week, so wants me to correct them. I'm not going to do that. We can't please all of you. We're human beings, so we're not even. So here's the thing: we're not even going to try. If we do things that you think are routinely out of context with our witness, we'll listen to that. But every single example, every single citation, no one can live that way. We would be paralyzed. So context remains king. There are some things we should never do. Take the Lord's name in vain, for example. And then there are other things that are gray areas that we should very strategically do and size up as much as we can what they do to our witness if we decide to do them ahead of time. More in a moment. Hey, did you know Fast Growing Trees has the biggest online nursery in the U.S. with thousands of plants and over 2 million happy customers? They've got all the plants your yard needs, like fruit trees, privacy trees, or privacy trees, as our English friends like to say, flowering trees, shrubs, and so much more. Whatever plants you're interested in, Fast Growing Trees, they've got you covered. Find the perfect fit for your climate and space. They make it easy for your dream yard. They also give you support from their trained plant experts on call to help you plan your landscape, choose the right plants, and learn how to care for them. And I know what you're thinking. How do you navigate a menu of over 6,000 samples when you're not already a subject matter expert? Well, Amy and I have gone through Fast Growing Trees several times, and they make it as simple and user-friendly as you could possibly imagine, and then it's just delivered right there to your front door. So this spring, they've got the best deals for your yard, up to half off on select plants and other deals. And listeners to our show, or viewers, you get 15% off your first purchase if you use the code DACE at checkout. That's an additional 15% off from their everyday low prices at fastgrowingtrees.com using the code DACE at checkout. Code DACE at checkout at fastgrowingtrees.com. Now, the perfect time to plant. Use DACE to save today. Offer valid for a limited time. Terms and conditions may apply. All right, let's get back to some Ask Me Anything, Aaron.
Let's continue with Michelle Arola Palmer. Being the sports fan that you are, what do you think about NIL deals for high school athletes? I'm personally against them because our teenagers have enough to deal with in high school. 2 different representatives in the Texas House have submitted bills for review and vote, and I pray those bills get lost and never seen again.
Why not?
Here's the thing. That was literally you
Based
said
on
it.
every principle we
I was
defended
just
in
about to
college
say,
football.
what standard would we deploy though to say that this is wrong? Right? I mean, because the counter arguments on the other side. Here's the thing. The counter arguments on the other side are a high school football player what's stopping a high school football player from just getting a job and getting paid to do absolutely nothing because he's the star player on the team? That's been going on for generations and decades, particularly in a state like Texas. Nothing is the answer. Nothing. Absolutely nothing stopping that. The problem we have is without a higher moral virtue, you're left to argue against these technocratic things. That's why the question of by what standard would we say no? Because if there isn't a higher moral standard, then just simple technocratic utilitarian ethics are all that is left at that point. So, I mean, that's where we are.
Well,
I mean, and that's why a lot of states have transfer policies where you have to sit out a semester or something to.
Yeah, well,
all those things pre-existed.
Why are those just? Because now we can say if you played JUCO for 2 years, that doesn't count against you. Why shouldn't you be able to go from high school football, one school, one season, basketball, a different school, baseball, a different?
Exactly.
Why not?
In fact, it's funny you should say that. Late last week, a federal judge seemed to indicate he is going to grant standing to a case that would basically threaten any eligibility rules or limited eligibility, that you could just be in college. You could be a college athlete for as long as you're good enough to play on a team.
All of this
completely detached from your student enrollment status whatsoever, basically.
All of this is just showing how big our idols are, because the simple fact of the matter, this is displaying that the real question with all of this is, do you want morality or not?
Yes.
Period.
Yes.
Period. And you got a lot of people in one walk of life, they say they do. But here, they've got a special shiny idol where it doesn't matter. We see you.
All right, next we go to Matt Thornton. With the trade war escalating against China with no end in sight, why hasn't the U.S. stopped flights, immigration, or any other free travel from China and Southeast Asia, considering how China finally ended the last trade war? It was losing against the U.S. in 2019 and 2020, meaning the pandemic. Why pick a fight and leave the door open to another accidental lab leak?
Absolutely excellent questions that I don't have an answer to.
I love this question.
I don't have an answer to that.
The fact that what you just said is so obvious and we aren't even close to even thinking about it.
Yeah, I don't have an answer to that. And if I had a chance, there are questions that I would ask. There are questions I would not ask if I had access to the White House directly, because I think I know the answer and what they are trying to do as in terms of why they're not answered yet. And I wouldn't want, because we're not in a normal media environment here. We're in a civil war, right? So there are questions, like, let's say I'm a reporter for a union newspaper in 1862. There are questions that I could ask President Lincoln or the War Department that I know my readers have, but I probably have, because of my job, probably have some insight as to why they haven't been answered yet, because of what is hoped for or planned for the future, and me getting out ahead of that would make me essentially an unintentional party to aiding and abetting the Confederacy. You see what I'm saying?
We're talking what you answered last time about context. It's
Correct.
The same thing.
And then there are questions that I don't know the answer to, that no one's made me privy to at all, and seems to be counter to our overall mission, and I think would actually aid the mission to ask, to find out if there actually is another part of a plan that I'm not aware of, and maybe that would be at least hinted at, or it might trigger some people to say in the Lincoln White House, maybe that McClellan guy is a really crappy general and we shouldn't keep him around. Now that you bring that up. See what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Okay. And this would be in the second realm of questions. This would be in the second realm of questions. See, if I had a chance to sit down with RFK Jr., I would try to find ways to ask him the questions I know you have, but I would not maybe ask them in the way some of you would want them asked, because I really believe that he is planning to exhaust a good bulk of his political capital on this autism study in September. Now, that study may come out and we find out that he punted and he puckered, and I was wrong. In that case, I'd adjust the questions I'd ask him accordingly, right?
Sure.
Okay, but as of between now and September, it doesn't do us any good on April 21st to risk that and get out ahead of that by having him get cornered from his own side on something that is ahead of a plan that is being laid out and executed. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Okay. But this one I don't get. I really don't know what if we're going to have a trade war with China. I have no idea, which I'm fine with then, but I have no idea then what gains the American people to have 300,000 Chinese nationals in their universities right now. Do you know what what's America first about having 300,000 Chinese nationals in American universities as opposed to Americans? I don't know the answer to that. And I don't think there is a good answer to that.
I agree.
And I think now you might find another host that maybe has better sources than us and knows more than us. And they would say what we're talking about, they'd put that in the camp of things they wouldn't ask, because maybe they know that there's levers of leverage that are going to be used here. And this is, I don't know, but I don't know. I'm not in on that. And to me, I think these are all very valid questions to ask. 100%.
Next, we go to Jonathan Mole. Do you know if Mel Gibson and his team are working on Passion 2? Do you know if they've seen Nefarious? Has anyone from their group reached out to Team Nefarious for any collaboration? I can tell you that Mel has seen Nefarious. I do know that for a fact. And that was communicated to Carrie and Chuck by Mel, in fact. They discussed it directly. I can also tell you that Caviezel has seen Nefarious multiple times. And in fact, one of our cast members is friends with Caviezel. Played one of the secondary roles in the movie, not Sean or Jordan. Is friends with Caviezel and took him to see the movie. And he was absolutely blown away. And the next several nights in a row, that James took groups from his church to the movie the next several days in a row. I know that for a fact. So there's a few other things I know that I probably shouldn't say right now. So, but to answer your question, I think I'm okay saying that for now. Next, we go to Trina Brousseau, who asks, is the number of times a person or subject is mentioned in the Bible always indicative of the theological importance of said person or subject?
I don't know that that's the case. Well, see, I've got to mentally process this right now. You know what? That's probably a good rule of thumb, but I also would be very careful about taking it too far. I'll give you one example. There's a prophet who only shows up, doesn't get his own book. He's not a major or minor prophet. And he shows up at the end of Ahab's reign. And so it's in his stories in one of the Kings or Chronicles. And so he's not a major or minor, by the way, doesn't mean, wasn't the minor league prophets weren't good enough to get called up. Major or minor means the length of the books that they wrote. Okay, so your major prophets, Ezekiel, Isaiah, Jeremiah.
Obadiah?
Well, Obadiah has his own book. Okay. So
I thought that's where you were alluding to. The majors is the minors.
Minor would be Obadiah, would be a minor. Amos would be a minor. Joel would be a minor. Okay, so even though Joel's prophecies are often quoted by people from an end times perspective quite frequently. So it's not necessarily based on the merit of what they were asked to prophesy, but the depth and length of the writings that the oracles that they gave us. Okay, or as Paul said it, the Jews were entrusted with the oracles of God, and so some people got more oracles to give than others did. Okay, that's what major and minor means. But there's a prophet who shows up one time, doesn't even have his own book, and his name is Micaiah. And I love this dude. Okay, like I have done numerous sermons in churches all over the country and messages over the years on Micaiah. So Micaiah is a prophet that is one of the few Ahab is yet to kill. And he's imprisoned in Ahab's in Ahab's kingdom. And the southern and northern kingdoms of Israel come together. So Judah and Israel, they come together against to repel a foreign enemy. And the southern kingdom, which still has the temple and still at least does some form of at least playing pretend with orthodoxy, the leader of the southern kingdom eventually says to Ahab, hey, I don't know how you guys still roll up here up north, but down south, we still consult God's prophets to see if he wants us to go to war, if Jehovah is actually calling us to do this, if this is what Yahweh wants, So, I mean, you got a bit of a reputation there, eh? But there's got to at least be one of these fellas still around, right? And Ahab's like, okay. And literally, this is what it says in the scriptures. Ahab literally says, all right, there's one of these guys left, but I got to warn you. He never tells me what I want to hear. I love this story. All right.
I just read it
yesterday.
Yeah.
Okay. He never tells. He literally says that. Okay. This guy never tells me what I want to hear. All right. So they bring him out of the prison. They send a guard after him, and the guard tries to loosen him up before he goes to talk and tell him, now you're going to tell Ahab exactly what he wants to say, and he's like, I can only say what the Lord wants me to say. And so the guard pimp slaps him a few times to kind of get him to, come correct. Right. So he brings him in front of the court, and Ahab's like, prophesy, we're about to go to war. Is this what the Lord wants? And the guy just like, oh yeah, man, you're so money. You've got it going on. Okay. You're going to win. You're the greatest ever. All right. Blah, blah, blah. And Ahab's like, no. This is the only moment of self-awareness in Ahab's entire kingdom. Okay. No. I know you're lying to me. All right. What's the truth? And the guy tells him, hey, you're going to get struck down in this war. It is what the Lord wants, because you're going to get struck down in this war. Just not in the way you think. You're going to get struck down in this war and by a deceiving spirit. And you're going to war by a deceiving spirit. You're going to get struck down in this war and dead. And your armies will scatter, and it'll be the end of your reign. Now, remember I just said a minute ago, Ahab has no self-awareness except this one time. It didn't last long, because what does he do? Goes off to war, gets struck down, his armies scatter. That's the end of his reign. All right. And so I love this moment. I do. I've used this as an illustration on shows and talks I've given all over the country numerous times over my career. But Micaiah doesn't have a book, specific to him. But I think it's a very poignant moment in the history of God's people prophetically, and can draw numerous illustrations for the times in which we have today. Now, are there a bunch of people named Micaiah? When you go do the upward football at your evangelical suburban church, a lot of kids named Jonah, Isaiah, okay, Jeremiah, Noah. Not a lot of kids named Micaiah. Not a lot of kids named that, right? Nevertheless, I kind of think that this is a very important moment. So in general, probably the more times you're referenced indicates the more heavily involved you have been in the prophetic or timeline, but that can be in the eye of the beholder as well. I mean, John the Baptist has very few mentions. I mean, one very significant one, but then that's it. The rest of the New Testament after this is without him. And Jesus says, no man born, he has no book named after him. Doesn't write any gospels, doesn't write any epistles. Jesus says, no man born of women is more blessed than he was.
Even in the shadow of what you're talking about, Micaiah, living at the same time as Elijah, who is constantly referenced in the time of
Great
Christ.
Point.
But he doesn't have his own book.
Right.
He's not actually in Scripture for that many chapters.
Elijah was basically a superhero to the ancient Jewish people. Yes.
But he didn't.
He didn't have either. Yeah, that's a great point. Great point. All right, folks, gas is still expensive. Your food shopping bill has come down actually a little bit, but if it seems like inflation is still being a little stubborn, that is correct. Well, did you know that MD Hearing recently cut their price in half despite all this craziness? And we're brought to you by our friends at MD Hearing, and right now you can get their Neo rechargeable digital hearing aids for only $297 a pair. That's 90% less than the clinical hearing aids, and the Neo fits right inside your ear. No one's going to even know it was there. And they just launched their Neo XS as well. That's their smallest hearing aid need ever. MD Hearing, founded by an ENT surgeon who saw how many of the patients needed hearing aids but couldn't afford them. He made it his mission to develop a quality hearing aid that anyone could afford. MD Hearing, they've sold over 2 million hearing aids, and they offer a 45-day risk-free trial with a 100% money-back guarantee, so you can buy with confidence. And they were just selected to be a hearing aid supplier for top Medicare Advantage plans as well. So get high-quality, affordable hearing aids that you deserve with MD Hearing. Just go to shopmdhearing.com. Use the promo code Steve to get a pair of hearing aids for just $297. Plus, they're adding a free extra charging case. That's a $100 value for our listeners and viewers here at the Steve Deace Show. That's shopmdhearing.com. Promo code Steve to get a pair of hearing aids for just $297 at shopmdhearing.com. Promo code Steve. How many questions we got left?
A lot.
All right, we're going to maybe we'll just do the rest of them in overtime.
Okay.
You agree with that? So we'll do bonus Ask Me Anything in overtime for Blaze TV subscribers at blazetv.com/Deace. We're going to record that right now, and then it will be uploaded later today there at blazetv.com/Deace. For the rest of you, we'll see you tomorrow. Until then, Romans 8:28.